So thank you everybody who's turned up, and I apologize. This is the first time I've done this talk, so please bear with me. This is my talk on building PHP packages. One of the reasons I wanted to give this talk was I've seen a lot of things coming out recently with instructions on how to build PHP packages, but a lot of them are kind of hidden behind paywalls, which I found quite frustrating. And as someone who does a lot of work in the community, especially with junior to mid-level developers, there's an instant blockage there. They can't get past how to start building these packages. So I thought I'd come up with a nice, simple talk, which would take you through the process of building a package. So who am I? I'm Steve McDougall. Most places you'll find me as just Steve King. I'm one of those guys who decided to take his wife's name when he married. So if there's any confusion on social media, which there usually is with user group organizers, that is it. I'm a user group organizer myself. I organize conferences. I'm a huge advocate for both PHP and Golang. Quite obviously a bearded man. I'm starting to get a little bit untamed now. And I'm a self-employed consultant where I do most of my work consulting on open source and APIs with my clients. So PHP packages, what are they? I'm going to assume you don't know. Most of you probably do, but they're just a really amazing way to kind of share functionality across projects and just kind of pull out little bits of logic or little bits of really useful code that you might want to use in different places to save you having to rebuild it every single time. All of them are typically located on packagist.org. There's private packagist available, and there's other ways you can store packages to pull them in through Composer. Some examples that I always use in any project that isn't framework based or isn't tied to a full stack framework will be things like the PHP League Tactician package or PHP DI for a really good dependency injection container, Symfony var dumper, which I always pull in when I'm doing any sort of development work, so that I can get a really nice output that I can dive into easily. And then the Rove security advisories is always one of my go-to packages. So live coding time. Most of this talk is going to be live coding. We're going to build a really simple task runner in PHP, write a few tests, push it up to GitHub, maybe run some GitHub actions, and then just stick it up on Packagist and create a release. There are a few examples out there that I would like to point out before going the completely from scratch route. You can use a really good package called Ramsey PHP Library Skeleton to kind of get you started. And what this will do, it will just really quickly get you set up. It's a nice little template. You can pull it down and you can just get started. It's giving you a really nice boilerplate just to start building a package. Everything's all set up for you. You don't have too many frustrating things to get set up yourself. Another one I used to use all the time before I found this current one is the PHP League skeleton package, which again is very similar sort of thing. Got a nice little pre-fill command, and it's just got all the nice things that you might want to use set up straight away. And then a final one that I'll mention before I get into anything in particular is the Sparsy package, which is the Sparsy package skeleton. They, again, it's very much the same as Ramsey's or the PHP Leagues. They're very, very simple setup, away you go. But what I like to do, I like to create these from scratch. So what I will do, I will just get started. So the first thing I do is come over to GitHub. And as you can see, I like to collect repos. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a nice new repository for this. And we're going to call this task runner. And what it's going to be is a nice, very simple task runner in PHP 8. It's going to be a nice public package, and we're just going to create that. Perfect. So now all I need to do is clone it. And this is where I really, really hope I have already got all of my SSH keys set up. So the moment of truth. That is fine with me. So what we're going to do, we are going to open Task Runner. Here we go. So what I'll do, I'll full screen this. If you need me to zoom in at any point, I will do. So the first thing I like to do on any time I'm starting to build a package is just to simply, don't need to do that because I already did that. Just compose it in it. This will ask me a few questions to get started with building my package. You add your vendor name first and then your package name. Nothing too tricky there. Away you go. And we can say a simple PHP task runner for PHP 8. Got ahead of myself with 9 there. Yep, that is me. We're going to go dev for that. And we want this to be a library, which is MIT license. I don't want to define anything yet. Required dev. Well, I may as well add PHP unit in now because I know I'm going to use it. Yes, sorry, did that one too early. I want PHP unit. I want the latest version. Let's see how well that goes. Yes. Yep, I'd like to do that as well. And please install my dependencies. Hopefully this will go nice and fast. But while I wait for that, so the first thing we need to look at when we're looking at building out our package is starting to get our project set up. So the first thing we want to do really is let's create where our code is going to live inside our source folder. Nice little naming convention is just use source as a folder. If you're using things like app or lib, there's nothing wrong with that. I tend to use a convention of using source because it is familiar for anyone else who might want to jump in and start getting involved. And then, of course, we are always going to want tests when we're doing any sort of work here. And while I'm waiting for all of that to start syncing and downloading from cache, I will create a nice new file if it wants to behave for me. Read me. This is how I usually start with a package. I will create the README first, and it'll kind of write out what I want to achieve. And this is a simple task runner for PHP 8. Then we have a nice simple installation instructions. We can quite simply compose a require task runner. It's still downloading. So what we want to do is we want this to be relatively simple. We want our code, all we want it to do is to create a container sort of class, and we just want to be able to add other classes into it which can be executed in sequence. It's nothing too technical, it's nothing too mind-blowing, but to get us started, I will start building it, or at least defining out the API. What I like to do is define the API before I start building anything. I find it gives me a place to start and a place to start looking. So what I typically do is is I'll go into the README and I'll say, okay, so I know first thing I'm going to want to create a task runner, and how I do that, I'm probably going to want to, I might want this to be static. I might not want this to be static. I quite like doing static constructors. So I'll say like prepare. I want this kind of option here for me to kind of pass in any initial tasks into this runner. So I'd do something like this. And then perhaps I'll say, okay, so now I have my runner. I want to add a task, which would be, this task here is going to have to follow some class or some interface to make sure that we're only ever adding what we want to add. And then we're probably going to want to, run it, run. Nothing too technical there. So that's kind of like the basic overview of what I'd do. So at this point, I'd usually go, okay, so let's add this to GitHub, commit, and let's say starting the build. Cool. So first things first, we've defined our API of how we want to build this package. We know roughly what we want this to do, but what's a task going to look like? How do we want our tasks to work? So okay, so we're going to want a task, and this is going to be it's going to be a class. How do we want this class to look? Well, what are we doing when this task is being executed? We're kind of handling the task, right? So we're going to want to build up a new class here, and we're going to say, okay, so we want a new, let's say add one, and then we can say, okay, so we want that to be in there. So that's my rough outline for what I'm building. The focus of this talk isn't on what I'm building. It's purely just to process the approach and how you can build a PHP package relatively simply. So if I take this as a nice little example, what I know I'm going to want to do is my first step is I'm probably going to want to start some tests. So let's first off look to get our namespaces loaded. So we'll always want to auto load. PSR4 is my preference. We will add our vendor namespace, and then we will just say, this is the package I am building, and that is currently all loaded in source. So what I like to do is, I've published a few packages now, and I've got a convention where this is my vendor. This is what I'm building. If it's a package kind of that I'm going to require into another package, which has got an overall theme, I usually kind of prefix this part of the name here with maybe the other part of the package name or a main topic. For example, I published a Neo4j query building library. And that worked with the Neo4j API, and it had a query builder, had a connection manager, all as separate packages. So it was all very interoperable. And what I did was I published them all separately, but they all had relatively similar namespaces up until this point. And then after that was the implementation for the package. So if you were going through your vendor tree, you could find all that code really nice and easily. Be writing my tests. My namespace. I like to put tests on the end. And we'll put that there. So now I can just do a nice quick composer update. And that works for me. I can now add my progress. There's auto loading. Cool. So the next step, I'm going to want to start writing some tests. So as if by magic, I happen to have one from another project, which I'll just add into here. Nice and simple. This is how I'm going to run PHP unit. So what I can do is I can quickly just say, perfect, no tests executed, just what I wanted. What I'll do before I get too carried away is I will add that build into my git ignore so that we do not submit that. So we'll close all of those off. I can now start writing some tests. So my first step, I'm going to build my runner first. So I want to build a nice runner test. Let's get started. I'm very specific. I like to declare strict types. Let's set our namespace. We're going to start with a nice test, and that is going to extend the test case from PHP unit. Perfect. Excellent. So what I'm going to quickly do, I'm going to do a quick segue. I am a huge fan of make files when I'm adding these sorts of things up. I don't want to vendor bin PHP unit all the time. It becomes a bit boring to keep having to do. You can do bash aliases, but if you're publishing this and other people are going to collaborate on it, it's nice to have a nice make file other people can work with. And this is one that I typically use, a simple test entry which runs vendor bin PHP unit, shows test docs because I like the visual output so that I know easily which ones passed, which ones failed. I like to add the coverage for the build. So that allows me to just quickly run make. Perfect, nice and simple. So what I'll do, I will quickly add that. It's nice to have these kind of restore points. First test class and make file. Cool. So how am I going to want to do this? First off, I want to be able to build this runner, right? I want to say, okay, so public function, it will build a runner. Cool. So all I really need to do here is assert an instance of, and this is where I'm going to use PHP 8 because I'm a huge fan of PHP 8 at the moment, and I love how declarative this is. Okay, so I'm going to expect a runner. And what I'm going to do is, the actual class I'm going to use is, I'm going to be using this class a lot. So I may as well move this to a internal method that's just going to give me the same thing back how I need it. So I'll just say, okay, so this runner. Perfect. So obviously that is going to fail like nobody's business. So my first step here, okay, so let's go nice simple function. We know that's going to return a runner. So we're going to return runner prepare. So before I do this part, I know that occasionally I'm going to want to test this runner that I'm building with tasks perhaps already passed in. So I'm going to pass in an optional array, which will then go to my task, go to my prepare method, which will allow me to kind of bootstrap it in any way that I need it to as required. So again, yep, we're still failing because we have not actually built this class. So that's my first step. Let's start building out this package. So do a nice quick declare, strict types, and our namespace definition. Let's just delete that last part there. Perfect. So now I can come back to here and I can quickly import that class. Excellent. Cool. So now we're calling an undefined method. Perfect. So let's move on. TDD style. So I know I don't want this to be kind of instantiated through its constructor. I like private constructors personally. Just a preference of mine, no specific reason. Perhaps it's just personal preference at this point. If anyone's got a reason why that shouldn't be done, always happy to hear them. And obviously using PHP 8, I can now take advantage of some fantastic options like this. Okay, so I want it to initialize with that. And I also gonna want my aim for this package. I just want to kind of like pass in eraser data and kind of do some transforming on it or do something with it in like a chain. So I'm gonna also pass through an array here for the payload, and that is also just going to default to that. But while I'm mentioning this, we're doing all of this PHP 8 code internally. We're going to have to require a very specific version of PHP in our require file so that people don't pull it in and it doesn't work for them. Again, instant errors just by trying to pull in a package. Typically, Composer will throw up an issue with this, but if they've got, ignore platform requirements, that does get ignored sometimes. So I can build it. That's fine. I've got my attributes up there. That's great. So now I can start with my nice static function called prepare, which will allow me to pass through an array of tasks. And all this is going to do is kind of return itself back. So let's return that back. So we just want to return a new runner, and we are going to have our tasks as the tasks that are being passed in. Quickly, what I would do before I do that step is I'll just drop this down because I also kind of want to be able to have the option to pass in any initial payload. So perfect. I can now just pass this through here. Perfect. That is getting closer. Too few arguments to prepare in my task here. Okay. Set some defaults, which means I can drop the defaults up here because it's a private constructor. I'm only ever going to call it through this prepare method. I don't need to be silly with that. So now I've got I've got my runner. Great. Now what can I do? I can start defining things. So my tasks, I want them to follow a specific pattern. So I'm going to want some sort of interfaces or contracts for these, aren't I? I use contracts because I use Laravel quite heavily in my day-to-day job. So it's a habit I've picked up. These are interfaces. So I'll create a nice quick task interface called task contract. And what I would do here is namespace. There's a reason I'm not using PHP Storm, by the way, in case people are wondering. I had some performance issues on my M1 Mac with PHP Storm running with Docker on in the background. So I just kind of adapted to VS Code for the short term, and it seems to be working quite well currently. So we have a nice task contract now. So what do we want this to do? The only method we really want to enforce with our task is kind of a public function, which will let people, we'll take in an array for the payload, and we want to kind of return some form of that payload back as an array. Simple. It's as simple as that. So where can we go now? Yeah, we've built this. We want to be able to add our tasks next. So initially, we're expecting this to be an array. So I'll do a nice quick test for that, because there's no harm in being thorough sometimes with your tests. Public function. It starts a runner with an empty array for tasks. So I can get my runner. This will prepare my runner. Don't want to pass anything to it. So, okay, I want to make sure that we're getting an array straight away. So I want to assert that it's an array. So we are going to say, okay, so the actual thing we're getting back is the runner. Let's just return the tasks. Is this gonna fail? Because we haven't yet added this method. So this is just a simple TDD approach. I'm sure most people are already using some form of TDD. So I won't go into too many details, and I won't explain too much why I do these sorts of things. I want to return this tasks. There. Perfect. I know I've got at least I know I've got an array back. So can we just make sure that it is empty? Insert empty. There we go. And we are going to check the actual again. It's the exact same thing. That's all we really need to test on this one. So yeah, we know we get an array, we know it's empty. That's our initial state. We know that anytime we build our runner, this is how it's going to start. This is what we're going to have. So next step is, okay, so let's add a new one. Let's test adding a task. So public function, it can add a new task. So let's get our runner back from the top of this class. And what we're going to want to do is we're kind of going to want to create some form of something to test, right? So we could create a nice abstract class here for the task, which is kind of like a null task, which doesn't really do anything, just to create our own mock at this point. So I'll create a nice new tasks directory here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a null task. And what we'll do is nice and simple. Let's declare types. Namespace tasks, and we want this null task. We want this to implement our task contract. Making sure we're following proper loading here. So okay, so we know we've got to implement this nice handle function. So we're going to get this array of a payload in, and we're just going to simply return it back. Not going to do anything too crazy with this. We'll just return payload because this is for testing purposes only. So we know now that we could, we can mock this for this null task. But what I'm going to quickly do is to aid in testing this for now, I'll just create this as an abstract class. And what I like to do here is, okay, so task, we want to say this get mock or abstract class, and that is going to ask for a task, and we're going to say the task. Perfect. So this should, in theory, give us nothing's failed, so we are still good to go. So what we'll do, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can maybe see a little bit more. So now what we're going to do, we want to add this. We want to say, okay, so runner, we want to add this task. We know this is going to fail. I'm not going to explain TDD to you or how we're doing red-green refactoring. I'm pretty sure that's useful for another talk. But for now, I want to be able to add. And I know all of these tasks are going to follow a similar contract. So I can say that this specific task will, any task coming in must follow this contract because we're expecting it to have a handle method on it. And it allows us to enforce this. And then we can say this tasks, let's just add this to the queue, and then just return back so that we can chain these on nicely. You could create a method for add multiple, allowing you to kind of throw in an array or throw them in as many as you need to. But for this case, I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. And now all we want to do is, okay, so we're not testing anything yet. That's fine. So we've added our task. So we kind of assume at this point that, it's not empty anymore. Our runner task is not empty. So we can say assert not empty. And the actual result will be the runner tasks. So now we can run our make command, and great, cool, we can add a new task. Let's make sure we've only added one in case we've got something weird going on. So let's say, can we do an account? Yes, we can. So we can say expected count is 1, and then let's just say the haystack is runner tasks. We'll make again. Great. So what we'll do, what have we added? Run a test and some stuff in the source files. Cool. So add initial tests, get that added, and then add anything in source. And now we're just going to say initial package. Oh, anything left? Requirement for PHP 8. Cool, we are up to date with our commits. So at this point, we've got our package. It works. We know it works. Can it handle a task? How are we going to get this to handle it? That's kind of the whole purpose of this package, right? We want to pass it a task, and we want it to handle it and work with it. So it can handle a task. Great. Simple. What more can you want? So we can say that this runner, we've got our instance of runner now. So let's say, what can we do? So when we add, let's say we're going to add a null task. If we pass it something, we're going to expect the exact same returned back, right? That's probably a good way to know that it's handled that task. So like we did above, we may as well just grab this and pull it back down. So we're going to handle the same task. So runner add. We can use PHP 8 here. I haven't done it up above, so I'll quickly be consistent with that one. Anywhere else? No, no, no. All good, all good. And what we'll do is do that there. What I'll do, a quick refactor here to try and make this a little bit nicer, is we'll just drop this down as well, and we will also say that we're going to be able to accept payload, which is an empty array also, and that's also going to pass that through. And we are all expecting to fail on line 76. What is it complaining? I didn't perform any assertions. Perfect. I do not mind that line now. So, our payload that we're going to return is going to be the result of the runner running. It's got the null task already added, and we kind of want to say, okay, so the payload we want a specific payload. So you're going to pass some data through. It's going to be a nice, simple array. I'm very unimaginative when I'm writing my tests and just usually just pass PHP unit because I know that's what I'm using. So we just want to pass data through. So at this point, we can go to a runner, and we know we can add this now. So we can say perfect function run, and we want an array for the payload, and we're going to want to return an array back because we're just returning back the payload in effect. So our run method, it's kind of relatively simple, really. All we need to do is say for each of the tasks that we've got as a task, let's just, at this point, we're just executing them, right? So let's get the payload here, and let's say that this is going to be the task handle, and we're going to pass through the payload for that task as payload. And at the end, we're just going to return the payload. Nice and simple. Nice and simple. So all we're doing at this point is we're going, okay, so get all of the tasks that I've got registered. And for each one, we're just going to take the payload, pass it through, and just iterate. Nothing too crazy. So let's make sure that our test's actually going to work. First things first, we want to assert not empty on our payload. Are we actually getting something that we can test back? Yes, we are. Perfect. So next we move on and we say, okay, so we know we're getting something back and our code hasn't just completely balked on us. We can say, okay, so we can say assert equals, and we can say, okay, so we're kind of expecting data that we've got written up above, and what we're actually getting back is payload. So let's see if it's going to be our friend today. Yes, we are good. So we've got 4 tests, 7 assertions, nice and simple. We've got a runner. It can be built, it can have its initial state, and it can do things, and we can run a very simple test against it. So, is that enough testing? Is that telling us that we're doing enough? Yes and no. I usually like to add a little bit more. I like to kind of go a little bit more in depth. At this stage, this is a handle method, but sometimes it's nice to add, much like middleware in your application stack, you like to do a before and after. So here we'll say, okay, so if method exists on our task, does the before method exist on our task? If it does, let's transform this early. Let's say, okay, so task run the before, and let's say, okay, so the payload for this is going to be the payload we're already being passed. And great, if it's like middleware, it's going to be exactly the same for after. So let's drop that down there as well. So, okay, so if we have an after method available, because we're doing any sort of transforming within our task, we can just push that back and transform it after we've done the main bulk of our logic if we need to. Might be an exaggerated use case, but it's nice to think you might need it one day. So what we'll do now is we're going to do a nice test to make sure that the before method is actually handled. Or I could probably skip and just say, is it going to do both or separately? I'll do them separately. Make it nice and quick. It handles the before method on a task. So what we're going to do, runner is a new runner. And then what we're going to do, we're going to say, okay, so runner, we want to add a new task. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to come into this folder, create a few stub classes, and we're going to say, okay, so let's create an add one class in here, because that's very simple to test with. Namespace is we will say, okay, so class add one implement task contract, and this is going to have a handle method. You know what, I'm going to call this add to. Part of my plan. Let's add to instead. So we got our nice little handle method, and okay, so we're going to pass through a nice little payload with count on it, and we're just going to say, okay, so we want this to kind of just add one, right? Add one at this point. So our payload count plus one, and then we're returning payload. So at this point, we've added a, let's say, a new add to. And what we're going to do next is we're going to assert that this is actually added quickly. So this assert not empty. And the actual thing we're going to test is the runner tasks. Let's run our make. That's fine. So next we're going to say, okay, so let's run it. Let's see what our payload's going to be. So at this point, we're going to get the payload. We want it to be make sure it's not empty. So I can kind of grab these, pull these down. Eventually, I'd pull these out to something maybe a little bit more common to use. So let's say our count at this point is going to be 1. Let's make great. So we kind of at this point the class is called add to. We expect it to add to. So this assert equals We are expecting, we're passing 1 in, we want it to add 2, that'll make it 3, but what we're actually getting is payload count. So there's a reason I wanted this to fail, is to show the before method. So it's kind of a very similar footprint. It's actually pretty much the exact same method, just with a different name here. So all we're going to do here is going to say, okay, so we're going to add 1 before we actually have to handle it. So we're going to add 2. Great, look, we're passing. Nice and simple. So how about we just create a add 5.php. What I'll do, I will copy this, add that to there, quickly rename this. It's going to be add 5. And the way we want to do the adding 5 so we can test all of it is the initial one, so we're going to add 4. And then let's add 2, let's make that 6. And then we kind of want to, okay, let's make sure we're handling the after method, and let's just kind of -1 at this point. And what we can now do is we can write a nice little test for that and say, test public function, it, if my typing is getting terrible, it is late, I do apologize. Public function, it handles the before and after methods. So what we're expecting to add 5 to anything that we pass through at this point. So let's say, this part is going to be very same. That's going to be relatively similar. Most of this is going to be similar. So we're just going to do all of this, and we're going to do an add 5 there. We're going to pass 1 in, and we kind of expect 6 back. So what I'll do is, if we didn't have that in there and we ran make, that would fail because the amounts, 7 doesn't match 6 because we're not minusing the 1. Perfect. So let's make sure this part is executed. Great. We know that that part is all working. And that's the majority of it. That is our package. We can start to add some documentation in here. We can label this usage. And what I will quickly do to show you how I usually would approach this is one of my packages, which I use for various things, a simple dot notation. I'd add badges, I'd add some descriptions, how to install it, a proper explanation of how to use it, where the tests are, any security recommendations, and I would go through it that way. But instead, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to ignore that for now. And we will do git status. Okay, so there's many testing stuff. So git add. And in here, we added running tasks. We just git add anything within tests. Test coverage. Yes. Cool. We are up to date, so we can just push that. Right. So while that pushes, let's see how good Welsh internet really is. Let's quickly refresh that. Great. I've got a nice little task runner up here, but we're not using GitHub Actions yet. I did use it on here. So what I can do, I can just follow a very, very similar workflow to what I usually do, and I will explain it as I go through. So come back up to here, and what we'll do, we'll just close all of those down, create a new folder for GitHub. We'll add a workflows folder in there for any of our GitHub workflow actions that we want to add. And we'll just call these tests. And what I'll do, I will zoom out, see if it is a little bit more legible. Yep. So callback tests, we're going to do this on push or pull requests so that anytime if anyone makes a PR, we can run our tests and make sure anything actually matches. We're going to want to start creating our jobs. Our main job here is going to be just running tests. And what we want the OS to be is we want it to be able to be listed here. So realistically, we could do Ubuntu latest or Ubuntu stable. You could do Windows. I typically usually just test on Ubuntu stable and then any PHP versions. The dependency version is always going to be preferred stable. And then the name for this test will be, PHP version, the dependency version on this OS. And our steps will be, okay, so let's check out our code to start with. And then, okay, let's quickly just cache our dependencies. Then we're going to do some setup of PHP. And then we're just going to quickly install all of these dependencies and then just run our tests. But for this one, we could probably just do a nice quick make. So that is all working, looking good. We'll keep that the same. We'll do a quick git add. We'll say GitHub actions. Push that. While that is pushing, we can come back to here. And what we will do is just see if this has started. And now our actions are running. Oh, and it's failed already. What is going on today? Apparently it just failed. I think I probably named it wrong, didn't I? Did I name something wrong? Summary. Why is this just not? No runner matching Ubuntu stable. Okay. Let's just do that. Commit. Push. Let's hope that now works. So I can move on to show you the next part, which is just quickly checking it up on packagist. So let's come over to here. Let's have a quick look. How's it running? What's going on? We're setting up the job. We can now check out code, cache any dependencies, quickly set up PHP, run through any dependencies, hopefully execute my tests, and move on. Perfect, perfect. All looking good so far. Installing dependencies. Nobody's complaining at me yet. That's what I like to hear. While that is going on, we are done. We are green. We have a GitHub action running nice and easily. What we can do, because what is the point in running tests if you cannot have badges? How do you get there? Here we go. Create status badge. Perfect. Let's just copy the status badge and let's stick this in our README. So we've got a nice badge of honor saying, look, Mum, I ran tests. Perfect. Git add. Commit. Look, Mum. Push. Perfect. Well, while that's pushing, I now know that my tests are going to run. And if adding to README fails the tests, then something bigger is wrong there. So I can now close that tab down. Perfect. So let's just grab the URL for this. We'll come over to packagist. If you've not used packagist before, it's perfect. You can search for anything, any Symfony packages. You can search for anything by the PHP League. You can search for anything by me. I've got probably a few too many up there now. The fact that you've got paginate to see all of my packages says that I need a better hobby. But what we could do, we can now grab this URL, come over to packagist and submit. Obviously, once you've created your account, check that out. Perfect. Yeah, there's some similar ones there. Other people have done similar stuff. Okay, so no license available. Cool. Well, what I'll do for now, I'll just submit it and show the process. Not auto-updated. Let's see if this complains. It's pulled some information. It's got my nice little badge of honor on GitHub. It shows any requirements it's got, any suggestions, any conflicts, what it provides in case you're providing any PSR implementations. And yeah, that's it. You can start to see your installs, your dependencies. A good use case is, here's one I made earlier. So, wow, I've got more downloads than I thought. You can see how many installs you've had. What other packages depend on your package. You can start to kind of see the tree of the impact that you've had with this specific package. And that is how you go from a loose idea of throwing together a nice, simple task runner in PHP 8 and get other people to hopefully use it later on. And that's my talk. I'll now take any questions. Thanks for listening. If you want to hurl abuse at me on Twitter, there's my handle. If you want to have a look at the code on GitHub, there I am. If you want to compliment me on Twitter, not as likely, but there is my handle. Any questions, shout them out, or I will just go and read the chat. But I'll stop sharing my screen now. Thanks, everybody. So, questions. Yes, somebody loves PHPDI. Likewise. The last one I mentioned was Symfony var dump. It's basically a good way to quickly just dump variables out in a nice way visually in the browser or in the terminal, and you can just see it nice and easily. Ben's changed it to Ramsey PHP library starter kit. Skeleton sounded morbid. Anyone else? Any other questions? What's my favorite VS Code extension for PHP? Honestly, I think what have I got installed currently? I quite like the IntelliSense. I found it actually really helpful because I'm a PHP Storm user. Having that IntelliSense there to kind of tell me what methods I've got available as I'm typing and start to see what the arguments are. It saves so much time. Even if it's a package you've built or a library you've built. I did a live stream 6 weeks ago on a package that I built, and I'd forgotten the own API for the package that I built. So I had to look at my own documentation while trying to do a live demo of a package I'd built. So yeah, that's probably my favorite one. I think Brian, that's the exact one that I use. Paul, we do need badges. We need more badges. We need an elephant badge. As you can see, I love elephants. So if we can get an elephant badge made in SVG on our repos, that would be even cooler.
I tried to do an elephant. It just doesn't show up very well that tiny, but I can work on it some more.
Yeah, no, do. That would be amazing. I will add it to every single one of my packages that not many people but me are using, but they will look cool and I will feel whole.
That was actually a movie quote. The badge
from Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
I thought it was Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
It's both. It was.
It goes back to that too.
Were there any other questions before I just kind of chat?
Not so much a question as a suggestion. You mentioned skeleton packages before. There's one at PHP PDS/skeleton. I've got a link in the chat. I did a ton of research trying to figure out answers to this same question. And it turns out after doing all of the research associated with that, roughly 70% of the packages on Packagist at the time conform with or essentially compliant with the research that I put together. You
Yeah,
may
no,
want to add that to your
it's got
listing.
some good contributors and a lot of used by. So, for me, that's a good sign. Definitely one I'd look at. Why do I prefer Make over the Composer scripts? Um, Habit, I think. Composer script. I've used a mixture of both. I think I'm in a kind of a Makefile mood at the moment because I do a lot with Docker as well. So having a Makefile available is always helpful. So I stick things in a Makefile. No specific reason other than personal preference. The Composer script will do the same job. Anyone else got questions or want to hurl some abuse? Eric, did you have any abuse for me as I've abused you before?
You know I love you, Steve. You know I love you.
That's good to hear. I won't tell my wife though. Cool. Well, I want to thank everyone for listening. If you've got any questions or you want to go over anything again, or just want to have a chat about anything, I'm on Twitter. DMs are open. I talk crap to everyone all the time on Twitter, whether it's helping them or just discussing the meanings of different parts of PHP and complaints with PHP. How many elephants do I have? 2, 4, 6, 8. I've currently got 8 elephants, 2 gophers, and a DigitalOcean Sammy. And I'm waiting on my new PHP, the Infinity Elephant, which I'm hoping arrives before I move house. And I've just 3D printed these little bad boys, which are kind of fun for my desk as well. So that's the soft ones and the small ones, which I'm hopefully going to get a bigger 3D printer and start printing some really big elephants.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for the talk.
That's okay.
Does the Infinity Elephant wear a glove? That would be interesting. They did make an elephant with like jewels or something on it at one time. I think it was just a limited one-time elephant, but yeah. Yeah, that would be kind of interesting though. I've fancied having like a what's it called? A rhinestone elephant for Nashville, but
that would kind of be cool.
I haven't wanted to like go through the process to get that done.
I think it'd be cool to get a glass blown elephant that you can keep like whiskey in or something. That would be probably cool. Like you've got
decanter.
Just unscrew it really carefully on the nose, so when you tip it, it's coming out of the elephant.
I would definitely use that.
I definitely would, but I don't think I'd use it responsibly, to be honest.
Nah.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Are there any final questions or anything you want to ask Steve before we get off of here?
Yeah, I got a question. So I'm working in an environment where we're doing a lot of proprietary software and working on a few different kind of customer and user portals that share some commonalities in the code that we've written in-house, but also do either a subset of the actions or what have you. So is there a way that we could take advantage of packaging this stuff up that would make it easier to deploy? Right now, we're just kind of treating it as a mono repo, and
100%.
Even.
I mean, you can go like the private packagist route. I think there's some free versions, self-hosted versions. I think one's called Satis. I know that's quite popular. The other option is to use just using Composer and pulling in like a local repository and just managing your CI/CD process of pushing updates to the packages on the servers where it's deployed, depending on how you manage your kind of your deployment pipelines. depends how I would do it personally. I'd be tempted with something like a self-hosted Satis if it's proprietary, because then you can really control access, and you've got full ownership over that, and you don't have to worry about juggling and orchestrating all of these. If you've got 20, 30 sites deployed and you publish an update to a package, do you want to chuck that across all of them, or do you want to wait until you're ready for deployment and pulling that latest version from Satis or from the private packagist.com site?
Right. Okay. I think I saw Paul mention Satis in our Slack a week or two ago. So
yeah, I know
out.
Sparsy use it quite heavily, and in the Laravel world, quite a few people are using it for their paid for additions to the ecosystem. So it's quite popular, quite reliable. You just need a nice auth.json in your repo, and it'll just pull updates nicely. Don't have to do much more than that.
Nice, thank you.
Okay, cool.
Anyone else?
Oh.
All right. Well, Steve, once again, thank you very much for
It's okay.
for speaking for us tonight. Really good presentation.